Tebow and Tracy. Good to see you. Shane, one more day to your birthday. 24 hours and you should celebrate today as well, and the day after. Did you know Kristen's birthday was yesterday? Your birthdays are almost together. So cool. So I'm here with all of my friends, and hopefully they become your friends too. If you're here for the first time, you got to look around. All these incredible characters now live in my living room. They were in my grandchildren's bedroom, but luckily they come to the front of the house and are here all day, every day, which is pretty cool. So today we're reading out of one of my very favorite books, and I think it was a favorite always for me because I associate this with my grandmother and my mom. My mom, who studied English in college, and my grandmother, who studied storytelling and accounting. That's cool. Both of them loved children's picture books, and so I'm very certain Beatrix Potter is one of my favorite storytellers because from the beginning of time, I have loved all of the stories that Beatrix has written, and she's the artist as well. I love them so much that, look, I have this, which is a Giant Treasury. I also have little tiny books. Oh, I have to show you this. Look what else is on my bookshelf. Little tiny versions of. Something about them being tiny. But inside are all of some of my favorite tales inside here in these tiny little books. But luckily for me, we've got this large treasury, and we're not going to read the whole book. This is a day where there's a collection of Beatrix Potter's works. She was from London, so just her accent made it quite engaging. And if you haven't seen Peter Rabbit, the movie, that 2017, where they were premiering, 2018, James Corden is the voice of Peter Rabbit, whom I think is a genius, and Rose Byrne plays Beatrix Potter. She's a beautiful actress. She goes by B in the movie, which sort of tells you it's Beatrix Potter, right, without saying Beatrix. And the most hilarious antagonist, the guy who's like messing with everybody. His name is Donal Gleeson. Yeah, he's from Ireland. Sounds Irish, doesn't it, Donal? So all those people bring these incredible stories to life. So I hope if you haven't seen that movie, and right now you might have some lovely evening with your family to look at it, it's pretty hilarious. So Beatrix Potter, and like always, Kermie, we're going to look inside. Come right over here next to Eeyore. Feet up here. We're going to look inside to see what happens just when you turn into the very front cover. Oh, obviously they wanted you to know that this is a treasury of all the stories. All these beautiful drawings, because here's the thing. Not only did Beatrix Potter write the words, she was drawing from the time she had a pencil or a crayon in her hand. And because she grew up out in the country, she and her brother were always out in the middle of the woods somewhere studying the animals. So she also got, wow, it could be dangerous out there in the woods. So all of her characters are quite lovely, but very real. Very, very real. I mean, she knows cats eat mice. So I love that part of who she is. So all of her drawings are beautiful. And so there's the collection, and here we have, right on the front, one of the families that is the most famous in the woods that she writes and draws about. And here's my name up here. That's my handwriting. I gave myself this book. I know that because if Muzzy, my mom, had given it to me, there would have been some wonderful squiggle right here with her name right next to it. Beatrix Potter with her original illustrations. And there he is. The famous Peter Rabbit. Remember we read one about Miss Tiggywinkle if you were here a few weeks ago? I love Miss Tiggywinkle. And although we won't read this introduction is great because what I love to know is who wrote the story and who drew the pictures. And look, there's a whole introduction that's quite beautiful about just who Beatrix Potter was and where she grew up, and she had a brother, and She and her brother drawing animals all the time, so you'll want to read that if you get this book. But what we're doing today is very simply the tale of Peter Rabbit. What's happening with him? Doesn't look like his mom is just tucking him in, does it? He's hiding under there. Huh. Wonder what's in that cup. It's obviously not vanilla ice cream, or I think his head would be out. Right? We'll have to find out. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a big fir tree. Oh, look at this. There's the fir tree. They have a little house right underneath it. Yeah? So you know Beatrix Potter, because she, as a little kid, was out in the woods, must have seen rabbits coming out of just this sort of house. Now, my dears, said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out. Oh, don't get into mischief. Yeah? Go along, don't get into mischief. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. Oh dear. Don't get into mischief, that's what she said. And here she is, she's off to the baker's to buy some delicious things. And there those brothers and sisters are, minding what their mom said, but, oh dear, Peter, straight to Mr. McGregor's. First, he ate some lettuces, and then some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. Ooh, he's having a feast. Well, there's a reason he wanted to go to Mr. McGregor's, right? He's just having a bit of a feast in this garden, vegetable garden. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. So obviously he knows what will make his tummy feel better. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Oh, heavens. Just having the most lovely time eating, and then eating too much, and then whoop! Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees, planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, raving a rake and calling, "Stop, thief!" These were not this rabbit's vegetables. This was Mr. McGregor's garden, but this rabbit was now eating. Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not, unfortunately, run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Oh dear, look. His little jacket caught on the gooseberry net. All was well. Of course, he didn't know where he was going, so he forgot where he was in the garden. That doesn't help. Oh dear, he's upside down. Not only is he caught in the net, he's upside down. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed some big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. So the sparrows come to the rescue, just like, like in Cinderella, when little birds help her build the dress. That's what it feels like. Sparrows came to his rescue. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. And he rushed to the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in, if it had not had so much water in it. Ooh, he escapes from one thing, jumps into a water can, splash, filled with water. Well, that's a great idea, but now he's sort of swimming in the water. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath the flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking at each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. Oh, see where he is? See the watering can? That's where he's hiding. Ooh, Mr. McGregor is getting closer and closer, one pot at a time, turning it over and turning it over until, achoo! Peter tried to put his foot down and jump out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Oh dear, there escapes the rabbit. Let's look at Mr. McGregor's foot. Right there in the middle, look at him. But Peter took off. Mr. McGregor just went, never mind, I'm going back. Whew, Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wonder about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. Where is the gate? Where is the gate? No jacket anymore. Lippity-lippity. Lippity-lippity. Looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. I found a door. It was locked. The mouse would have helped him, but her mouth was full, taking food to her family, and then there's this cat. Not to trust the cat. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Look at this. Look, you can see the gate just at the very edge of the picture. Look at that. Oh, you can see it, the gate at last. Ooh. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him right at the corner, and Peter didn't care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. slips under the gate. Do you see that? Just enough room to slip under the gate. You see Mr. McGregor? Couldn't catch him. He slipped under. And, however, I don't think that will just scare the crows. I think maybe if I'm Peter Rabbit, that might scare me. There's a stick with my clothes on it. And his shoes. Look, his shoes are hanging there. Ooh. No jacket, no shoes. Peter stopped running and looked behind him. Peter stopped running Peter stopped running or looking behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. Have you ever been that scared? You just run toward where you need to go, toward the light. Whew, he was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he'd done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Look at her. There he is, safe inside the house, you see? There she is, looking at him like, jacket gone, shoes gone. Second time. I'm so sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. Ooh, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. Yes, they had a delicious dinner. But as we know from the very first picture, now we know what this is. That is the end of the story. He is safe and sound. I don't know what's happening tomorrow when they have to talk about the shoes and the jacket gone for the second time. The end. And that's the story of Peter Rabbit. You won't believe what happens in the movie if you decide to rent the movie or buy the movie. Oh, you won't even believe all of the trouble that Peter gets in, and takes his family, his brothers and sisters with him. Good heavens, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. My cameraman, Dexter Adolph Jung III, is so happily telling me that while I was reading, the door opened, and a few of you who came in that I haven't said hello to. Sydney, Roy, oh, I love it. Home from the university and all snuggled in Fort Worth. I'm so happy you're in Fort Worth. And Cheryl, good to see you, Miss Appel. Tell your adorable child we miss her, and I hope you guys are safe and sheltered in, taking really good care of yourselves. And also for Peter Rabbit this morning, Jaden, our Australian friend, incredible actor, and Peyton, good to see you. So older children, adult children, little children, perhaps Stella is here. I don't know. Hi, Stella. How are you, Colby? It's so good to see you. So I just think that starting any day with an incredible children's book is a really wonderful thing. And so I just think that Paxton, you know, and Jaden knows that art is a comfort, and words and music and stories just connect us. So this morning, for those of you who are new Kids Who Care friends, but especially my old friends, thank you for coming. It makes me feel connected to you, and for this time that we're all sheltered in right now, it just gives me hope to know my friends are still out there. Someday we'll be on the front porch of the Scott Theater in Fort Worth and hug each other. That's for certain, Jaden and Paxton. That is for real certain. And for all of our friends who live in Fort Worth, I hope this gives you a little tingle, a little joy at the top of your day. I also want to say thanks to Daisy, who's keeping Dexter and I company Daisy is my dog, and she's doing quite a good job of keeping us playing outside as often as possible. And so if I see you ride by on your bicycle, all three say hello to you. And also, as you're leaving, I wanted to remind you, and for people like our friends who grew up performing on stage, you're going to recognize this. This is the opening song to look up, which we're doing in July. And even if we don't know if we'll be virtual or together, what I can tell you is July will come and we'll get to spend time together. This is Marissa Sykes, The Little Mermaid. See you tomorrow.